Hey friends, it's a rare event where I'm recording a video early in the morning, and so you can see the yellow light from this light, and you can also see blue light from the sky, which is an interesting. It's like one of those movie posters, it's like Anyway, I haven't made a YouTube video in a while, mainly because I've been thinking about my essays, which I'm always thinking about, and I actually want to do a kind of meta thing. I have a bunch of notes I want to go through. I guess this is my January update. Right? I didn't post a January update, so what has January been like? What has 2023 been like? I feel like I've been very tense, very not very tense, but I've been kind of tense, and I know I've had some good times. I met some friends, which is great. I What else? I'm hanging out with my wife. It's nice. Oh, I'm going to New York next month, finally, right? And I'm almost scared to talk about it because I have been wanting to go to New York all my life. I've planned multiple trips, which all didn't work out. The best plan I finally came up with, and I booked my tickets and everything, was right before the pandemic hit. It was gonna be April 2020, and then the pandemic hit in March, and so the flights were cancelled. Um, yeah, so I'm almost nervous to say too much about my trip because even though I've booked my tickets and everything, a part of me still feels like it might not happen. So I don't know, but yeah, I'm gonna if things go well, you'll see me do my phone camera videos in New York. I'll do one in Times Square, Central Park, Brooklyn Bridge, maybe. I don't know. I'm just gonna wander around New York and take videos. That'll be fun. I want to do a lot of writing still. I feel like a thing that I finally thought of doing like a couple of days ago, because I'm always complaining about my notes. I have so many notes. What do I do with all these notes? And it's very hard to move notes around where they are, right? It's easier to move everything out of one place and then put back what you need and then get rid of the rest or process them in some other way. And what's funny was, I re-logged in. I logged into my Evernote again for the first time in years. So I think if you check my YouTube videos all the way back, there was once a point in time where I moved all of my notes from Evernote to Workflowy, and then at some point I moved all my Workflowy notes to Rome, where they still are mostly. Right? I mean, each time I move stuff over, I try to do some editing in the process. And now most of my notes are on my iOS notes, which is there's like over 1,000 notes there, and it's overwhelming. And how I'm processing it is I'm moving some stuff to Evernote. And as I say this now, I was thinking I'm gonna make this video and then upload and then go back to bed because I woke up at 5 a.m. today to do a call. And I was thinking I'm gonna record this and go back to bed, but now I'm thinking it would be nice to make a bit of a dent in sorting my notes from iOS to Evernote. And the idea is really it's a kind of carousel kind of thing where I move things from one thing to another and then I learn something in that process. Then I move things from here to the next thing. I learn some things in the process. I publish an essay about some of those things so that I can get rid of stuff if the essay is the final form. And even I would say both of my books, Friendly Ambitious Nerd and Introspect, they are largely manifestations of my notes, right? So like my note, I think it's a Richard Feynman quote where somebody says something like, "Oh, are these notes of your thinking?" And he's like, "That is my thinking. My notes are my thinking." Something like that. And I relate to that. I feel like I want to joke that when people ask things like, "What do you want to put on your gravestone?" I'm like, "Here lies Visa. He was almost finished sorting his notes," because there is a Sisyphean infinity to it. Anyway, it's been about 4 minutes. Anything else I want to say for my January review? I worked out a little bit. I've been sprinting. I've been doing deadlifts. I'm happy about both of those things. Um, Sleep's not as great as I wish it was. I've been reading more. I've been reading Silk Roads by Frank. I don't know his last name, K something. And I've been reading Montaigne's essays, which are great. So I'm looking forward to more of that. I've been watching Fran Lebowitz on Netflix. There's this show called Pretend It's a City with Martin Scorsese, and I love her. She's kind of nerdy, almost hyper verbal nerdy. I almost want to say autism ish, but I don't know if she would like that assessment. So I'll just say she's a hyper verbal nerd. I think that's hyper literate. Very like her sentences really. She speaks in these very frenetic. She speaks at a frenetic pace, even as an older lady, right? And I enjoyed watching it. I felt very represented. she reminds me a bit of myself, and she reminds me a bit of my wife. Just such a nerd. I love it. What else? I just watched the movie called New York with my wife. It's a Bollywood film about like post 9/11 Patriot Act. It's a stressful, kind of cheesy, kind of sad movie about like a guy who was suspected of terrorism, and he wasn't, but then he decided to turn to terrorism. Ah, man, life, and cycles of violence and fear, and I was just thinking about all that stuff. Was a lot to get into. I just so my call earlier today was about intellect salon about Singapore with someone who is from SF, and is kind of very has a rosy-eyed view of Singapore, which is, I would say, partially correct, but like the interesting thing is just trying to discern what is correct and what is not, and I don't necessarily know what's correct exactly, because insiders and outsiders can see things that the other cannot, and so you kind of need both to get perspective. What else? So last month I did an essay called "Are You Serious?", which I think is one of the best essays I've ever written, which I'm very proud of. But it's the only essay I wrote that month, which is, I'm so hard on myself, I guess, because if I could write one essay a month that I said is the best essay I've ever written, or in the ballpark of like my top 10 kind of essays, one a month is great. That'd be amazing. One really good essay a month, that's way above my average. And yet I'm like, I wrote one of my best essays of all time, but I didn't write anything else. Gah. So I gotta find peace in myself. I hope you guys are well. Hope future visa as well. And I'm gonna just stop this here. Let's get it on then.